What was the difference between the Red Sea crossing and the Jordan River crossing? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Joshua on Walking Through the Bible. The glory of his cross. If you have a Bible with you, turn to Joshua chapter 3. We're going to be reading from verses 9 to 17. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Joshua 3, beginning at verse 9. So Joshua said to the children of Israel, "Come here and hear the words of the Lord your God." And Joshua said, "By this you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from you the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Hivites and the Perizzites and the Girgashites and the Amorites and the Jebusites. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is crossing over before you into the Jordan. Now therefore, take for yourselves 12 men from the tribes of Israel, 1 man from every tribe. And it shall come to pass, as soon as the soles of the feet of the priests who bear the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the Jordan, that the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off, the waters that come down from upstream, and they shall stand as a heap. So it was, when the people set out from their camp to cross over the Jordan, with the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people. And as those who bore the ark came to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests who bore the ark dipped in the edge of the water, for the Jordan overflows all its banks during the whole time of harvest. But the waters which came down from upstream stood still, and rose in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zeratan. So the waters that went down into the sea of Arabah, the salt sea, failed, and were cut off, and the people crossed over opposite Jericho. Then the priests who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel crossed over on dry ground, until all the people had crossed completely over the Jordan. In our last lesson, we have Israel breaking camp from the plains of Moab and heading towards the Jordan River. On our map, that has them moving west. In verse 8, we have Joshua telling the priests that when they come to the banks of the Jordan, that they were to stand in the Jordan. Now, from today's reading, we know that they weren't to wade into the water. However, they were to dip their feet in the water. If nothing was done, though, the priests would have to wade out into the river in order to cross. What Joshua said next was that what was about to happen would prove to Israel that God would be driving out the people of the land of Canaan. Remember, most of this generation wouldn't remember crossing the Red Sea, though some under 20 might remember that. All they had seen was God sending manna from heaven and giving them victory over Sihon and Og. And while those victories were impressive, the peoples of the land of Canaan were more numerous and the land far more expansive. Moreover, the Jordan River had flooded its banks as it does in the harvest season, making the springtime in the month of Abib or Nisan, an important point to remember for later. The fact that this was spring harmonizes with where Rahab hid the spies, which was on her roof among the flax. Flax was harvested in the springtime along with barley in Palestine. With the Jordan River flooded, it might have disheartened some people into thinking that they wouldn't be able to cross. Joshua was going to put any of those potential thoughts to bed by telling them the miracle that God was going to perform. And what was that miracle? That when the soles of the feet of the priests who bore the ark of the Lord rested in the waters of the Jordan, that the waters would be cut off. Now this is a little different than the Red Sea crossing. If you remember back to Exodus 14, when Israel crossed the Red Sea, there the waters were parted on both sides, making walls of water. Truly a wondrous miracle. However, here in Joshua, what is said is that God would stop the river's flow, but not where Israel crossed, but further upstream at the city of Adam, noted on our screen now. Now you might ask yourself, why the difference? And although I cannot definitively prove it, it probably has to do with the waters that were being crossed. The Red Sea's waters are fed further away by the Indian Ocean. The miracle, thus, that would have been required, if God performed the miracle like he did here in Joshua 3, was for God to stop the waters of the Indian Ocean from feeding the Red Sea and then sped up the evaporation of the Red Sea, which was the only way the Red Sea at that time lost water. Parting the waters of the Red Sea rather than removing the water's source was thus the way God chose to handle things in Exodus. However, here in Joshua 3, the Jordan River flows south into the Dead Sea, or the Salt Sea, with the Dead Sea not being very far from where Israel was located. Cut off the waters of the Jordan River, something that could be done by man through the use of a dam, and the riverbed would eventually dry up, making it easy to cross. Instead of making a dam, though, God just chose to miraculously hold back the waters further upstream, meaning Israel had to wait for the remaining waters to flow past, after which they could cross. It was a similar miracle, and it was a miracle, but it wasn't exactly the same miracle. The further miracle was that Israel crossed on dry land. If a river dries up, it would leave mud behind that would have to dry and harden. God dried the ground immediately, making it possible to cross. We find from chapter 4 that the priests holding the ark actually stood by the river while the people crossed, meaning that the presence of God remained at the river while Israel crossed. This truly was an amazing miracle, one that would have instilled faith in Israel because Joshua proclaimed the miracle before it happened, and it is one that still should instill faith in us today. Before Israel crossed, 12 men were selected, one from each tribe. We'll find out the reason for this, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Joshua chapter 4, verses 1 to 9, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.